Hello, everyone. Randall Ulrich here. I saw a lot of good work being done as far as the Week 5 discussion question was concerned, and I thought there were a few points that were worthy for calling attention to. If you haven't had an opportunity to review all of the responses for Week 5, go back and take a look. There was a lot of good information being shared in that particular discussion section, and it's definitely worth your while to read it. But for some of the points that were worth mentioning, I wanted to call attention to a few of those. And the first one is student-centered learning. And on that, you'll find that education generally and online learning specifically, the trend now is to move toward a learner-centered model as opposed to an instructor-centered model. So you may have heard the phrase sage on the stage, and that's for instructor-centered training. Guide on the side, you may hear that phrase, and that is the teacher takes a facilitator role and the learner becomes the center of the training. So there's a lot of good research out there that supports that. If this is an area you're interested in, there's an abundance of studies out there and a lot of evidence to support that. The second point that I noticed, and this came up in a couple of different discussion responses, preparation of online courses. So if any of you are thinking of utilizing your class and turning that into online learning, you may want to make note of, in reference to one of the comments I saw, that it should be fairly easy to put these materials together. There's an industry rule of thumb for any online training, and this is the area that I can deal with specifically. I can attest to this. The rule of thumb in the industry is for every hour of instruction, it takes at least 40 hours of preparation to create that 1 hour of instruction. So just something you might want to be aware of as you move forward if you're going to create online materials for yourselves. If anybody in the class has already done this and they've made use of a lot of videos or online materials, if you can share your experiences, that would be good. I'll leave it up to you if you want to do it, and if you do, how you want to present that material, I'll leave that up to you. There was one portion about making connections with folks, and I thought that was a very interesting point. The only thing I'd like to say on that is if you're going to make connections with your peers and you do want to address whatever points they've made, it's fine to agree with others, but don't be afraid if you have an opposing viewpoint to say so. Don't be afraid to speak up. It's also the basis of good research that you don't just seek out opinions or viewpoints or research that agrees with what you already believe. Sometimes, and it's a point of discussion in the academic world, that you should actually seek out opposing viewpoints because you need to make that aware. So any academic research that you do, you should always be able to provide opposing viewpoints. Now, they may or may not weaken your argument. It may just be for awareness purposes. It may be that newer research contradicts the older research. You need to bring that forward. So don't be afraid of opposing views. Don't be afraid to speak up. Now, if you do bring that up, you do want to make sure that you support your argument either way and just acknowledge that all the other viewpoints that do exist. You'll notice that I had you do this when doing the research and responding to your peers. I had you read the work done by your peers or the ones that they had pulled up so that you see that there are differing viewpoints on topics so that you have the exposure. Not only did you find sources that agree with what you already believe, but you need to know what else is out there. And the final point that I wanted to address, social networking tools as training tools, that came up in one of the discussions. There is a trend in the online learning world now, especially in the corporate environment, to use social networking tools for informal training. One of the cautions that I would give you on that, with some of the social networking tools, either through their limitations or how they're designed, or especially how they're used, and if there's no formal training that goes along with it, you run a risk of passing on bad information. If there's a lot of I think, I feel type statements, chances are there's no research that's been done. So you always want to be careful. It is a tool. It does have its place. Informal training is fine, but just be aware that you run the risk of bad information. So always look at it with a critical viewpoint. And this is one of the reasons I always make sure that every time you respond, if you take a position, always support it with the reputable literature. So always make sure, what are your sources? Are they reputable? Are they supporting your argument? So as I say, for week 5, I saw a lot of good work. Overall, very pleased with a lot of the things that you had written. I specifically stayed out of the discussion this time. I did not provide feedback. I wanted to let all of you talk to each other. And that's fine in the beginning for me to guide the discussion. This particular discussion week, I step back, let you do your thing, and then come in after the fact and make mention of particular points of importance. So continue with what you're doing. Make sure that you're getting your work in by your deadlines. And particularly whenever you're doing your discussion questions, try to go back to get the initial response by Wednesday so that your peers have an opportunity to see what you've written, and then they have an opportunity to respond. I'm noticing there's a trend toward later and later in the week to get this done. So whenever you can, do the initial response by Wednesday, and then that gives you the remainder of the week to respond to your peers. But otherwise, I see a lot of good work. All right. Thanks, everybody.